Welcome to Bandit's Keep. I'm Daniel. Today we're going to talk about Megadungeons. So I've had this note in my notebook for, 9 months as a title for a video, which I didn't actually use, that just says, "Your Megadungeon is too big." And this comes back to where I was building a Megadungeon on this channel, which I will get back to. I know some people really like the adventure building. We're going to do more of that in 2023, don't worry. And thinking about the idea of the Dungeon 23 challenge that's going on. I'll put links to the Dungeon 23 challenge in the notes below if you want to look at it, but effectively the challenge is that you are building a Megadungeon over the course of 2023, one room at a time. Every day you do one room, each month is a one level, so at the end you end up with a Megadungeon of about 365 rooms and 12 levels. Well, that sounds awesome, no? Well, a Megadungeon doesn't need to be 1,000 rooms or 500 rooms or even 365 rooms. What makes a Megadungeon interesting is the changing, shifting architecture, the weirdness of it, the draw of the dungeon to bring people in. And I think that if you look back at the philosophy in original Dungeons & Dragons in those first few years of the game, and I did not play back then, but I'm reading it now, I'm looking at books, I'm listening to people talk about things, we see something a little bit different than we see from, let's say, the 80s on, which is when I did play. Basically, the Hickmans created this set of adventures, and a lot of people call it the Hickman Manifesto or something like that. But effectively, they came up with these 4 ideals that would be great for the adventures they were doing. And you can see these things bleed into the adventures they created later, like Ravenloft or Dragonlance. I'm going to kind of talk about each one. I'm going to quickly say each one and then the counterpoint in a Megadungeon, and then we'll dive deeper into each of them, and we'll talk about why some of them clash and don't work, and how we can use some of them, and how we might build a Megadungeon that's really fun for our groups to play in. So number 1, the player's objective need to be bigger and more important than just pillaging. Well, in a Megadungeon, that's more or less the opposite, at least at the beginning. The players in a Megadungeon, or the characters that are going to go into a Megadungeon, are adventurers in the old-fashioned sense. They're looking to discover lost things. They're looking to find things that nobody else has seen before, to bring forward, bring up to the surface, as it would be, treasures beyond treasure, so they can gain fame, fortune, and become heroes of legend. Sure, you can do that by killing a vampire, but you can also do it by exploring the depths of a Megadungeon. The dungeon needs to have an intriguing story built into it. I feel like in a Megadungeon, this is counterproductive, and we'll talk more about this below. In a Megadungeon type campaign, the story is what the PCs do, what the PC's goals are when they go into the Megadungeon, what they bring out of the Megadungeon, and how that affects the world. It's not something that you created ahead of time. Number 3 is the dungeon should have architectural sense. Can you say mythic underworld? Megadungeons are all about weirdness, tilted passageways, strange chutes, teleporters, dead ends, passageways that reform. A Megadungeon should not make architectural sense, at least not the whole thing. An attainable goal that you can do in 1 to 2 sessions. I think this is a great modern kind of game design idea, not pushing stuff to take 1,000,000 sessions. But in a Megadungeon, the player characters, or the players really, set their own goals. That could be a single delve, it could be 5 delves. It really depends on what they're after. Trying to clear an entire level, looking for an item that they know is down there, following a treasure map. So how long it takes, and obviously the entire Megadungeon is not going to take 1 or 2 sessions. But Megadungeons can be broken up into chunks that become individual adventures, and I think that's the way that we want to consider this. I've run several, played in a couple, and read many published Megadungeons throughout the years. Some of them are amazing. The concepts are so cool. The worlds they create are amazing. But after about a third the way through, all of them that I've looked at, I'm sorry to say, fall flat unless things from the outside are brought into them. Because if you take a Megadungeon and you follow some of these modern game design things and you make it make sense, it's a giant tomb. You make a story behind it. There's a lich at the bottom. You make it make architectural sense. Well, there's crypts over here and there's stairs over there and this and that. You make it so they can get it in 1 or 2 sessions, which none of them do that. In fact, that's the problem, right? If the Lich is the thing and the architectural sense all makes sense and everybody goes into it, you're basically making a one-shot that's too big. This is the problem, air quoting here, with most Megadungeons that I see. A Megadungeon to me is not something that you should buy pre-made. A Megadungeon is something that you create as you go because it needs to shift, conform, and be distorted by and for the players and the player characters. The Megadungeon itself is a puzzle. The Megadungeon itself is a world that's being created with your players. You cannot create a huge Megadungeon, drop a set of players into it, and expect that they're going to stick with it for multiple years because it has a steady theme. That's going to become boring. People want to accomplish goals and big goals, and they want to decide when they come and go. They want to choose. That is the concepts and philosophies behind the Megadungeon. In the original game, you're looking at something like 20 players in a campaign, which is multiple groups of people going into this Megadungeon at different times, pulling stuff out, challenging each other. Maybe we can't always do that, but if we have our one group, you can create rival NPCs groups. You can have things just randomly change, make some tables of moving treasures around or disappearing or adding monsters so that the dungeon feels like things are coming in and out of it, even when the player characters are not. Now, I would never say that people do not accomplish it, but I think trying to make a single theme last through an entire Megadungeon and make it fun is a Herculean feat. It doesn't seem like realistic for most of us to pull off. And again, in my experience, and I'm sure I'm getting comments below telling me which Megadungeons are amazing, and I'm not going to slight any Megadungeon. If you love one, awesome. I can't see how any of them are sustainable for me as a dungeon master or for the players over a long term if they just have one thing. Sure, it doesn't make sense for there to be a Lich wandering around the third level, where there's a bunch of bugbears and stuff running around, but it's fun, isn't it? Why is that Lich there? What's going on? Is the Lich trying to take over the bugbears? Is the Lich trying to stop you? Maybe they're trying to escape. Maybe there's an item on that floor they need. This is the weirdness that makes Megadungeons interesting. Okay, so let's go back to why I think Dungeon 23 is really interesting. With Dungeon 23, if we don't just make the Megadungeon to make it, and we make it to play it. And I'll put a link in the show notes below. There's a great podcast by Chicago Wiz, Dungeon Master's Handbook. He talks about this. He's doing this and running his. If we make the dungeon to play, and we play it as we go, and we shift it, and we adjust it, and we manipulate it to fit our players, it will be much more fulfilling for everyone. Sitting there staring at a piece of paper going, okay, there's 3 orcs in this room. There's 2 goblins over here. Oh no, goblins and orcs together. We can't do that. That doesn't make sense. This is not the way to build a Megadungeon, in my opinion. To build it is to have it delved, to have them go deeper. Those higher levels don't exist until the players get there because you're building it as you go. You might spread the first level out over 3 months and then have only 5 levels deep. That might make sense for you. But if we go with what's here and we say, all right, we're going to build 1 room per day, and which is basically 30 rooms, and we're going to build 1 level per month. What could that potentially mean for us? Number 1, my caution would be, don't just build rooms. Build empty spaces, corridors, caverns, weird situations. In old school D&D, they generally recommend that 1/3 of the space is filled with monsters, 1/3 is filled with maybe something unusual, and 1/3 is empty. And that's fine. Some days we need to just have an empty room. Empty rooms are amazing. They're great places to hide out. Things can change and enter the empty rooms. The empty rooms are a good place to make, if you want things to make sense as far as a random monster. That Lich that's on the 3rd level, we'll put him in an empty room. He's not going to be in with the bugbears, obviously, unless he's destroying them. So, or recruiting them, I guess. So we want to build this thing as we go. And we can, if we think about it, BX tells us that we should try to level up a character once every 4 to 5 sessions. So if you're playing a weekly game and you're building the dungeon 1 month, 1 level a month, you can actually have a party progress all the way to 12th level if you fill that thing with the weirdness that it needs. You cannot have on the 5th and 6th level of the dungeon a bunch of orcs, unless there's 1,000 of them, which could be pretty interesting, actually. Maybe the 5th level of the dungeon, they climb down this ladder and there's this giant open space with 500-foot ceilings with a false sun, and there's 1,000 orcs down here. Maybe, right? It's a Megadungeon. Maybe one level just drops them on the surface of Mars and they have to fight the green Martians, right? Until they can figure out how to get down to the next level or back up, right? Which is in the sky. Who knows, right? This is what our Megadungeon can be. We can fight dragons on the 12th level of Megadungeon. We can have demons on the 10th level of the Megadungeon. We can have all these crazy monsters that are powerful with piles of gold and 150,000 gold pieces after you defeat this red dragon. How do you get it out? You go back to town, you hire a group of 50 men to come in with sacks to come down, and you're leading this like army of people coming down to get the gold out. This makes the Megadungeon amazing. Or maybe you got a high-level magic user and you can teleport the stuff back and forth. Who knows, right? You're guarding this stuff for days as the magic user's teleporting in and out with like carts full of, gold. This is basically what we need to do, right? We need to create these weird situations that the characters can overcome, and we might be able to create a party that will get all the way to level 12. Well, probably not the original characters, and attain that massive level. Am I going to do that? Probably not. I don't think I'll go that deep because we'll see where it takes me, but I don't know. And I'm willing to let the dungeon take me where it will. My plan is to start. I already have a blog that I mostly just put the podcast on. I'll put a link to it. I'm going to write my progress in. Probably once a week, I'll write something up. I will probably wait a month and then start running this thing once I have the first level done, so that I can get enough rooms to kind of work with. And I think, I'm going to run this thing. I might just come back here once in a while and talk about it. I might put some of it on my actual play channel. Check that channel out if you don't already follow it. After the first of the year, I've got a bunch of stuff I've been working on for that channel. I might talk about it in my podcast. The links to all these things are going to be in the show notes, as well as a link to my Discord server. If you're not part of the Discord server, jump on over there. I may make a room for this, maybe with some threads of people building it. I'm kind of unsure. I'm going to see what people want. But join my Discord server. It's super fun over there. And if you like the content and you want to support the channel, check out my Patreon. I'll see you soon.